That's what we need to change. We need to make this economy work for us. Because if the economy doesn't work for us, what's the point? Right now, GDP is going to go to record highs. Self-driving cars and trucks would be great for GDP. Meanwhile, Americans are literally dying younger. Our life expectancy has declined for the last 3 years because of drug overdoses and suicides. They've both overtaken vehicle deaths as causes of death in this country for the first time in history. And so we're just chasing the wrong measurements. We have to change our economic progress measure to include things like our health, our mental health, how our kids are doing, how our environment is doing.
So let's talk brass tacks here about this election. Realistically, in this crowded field, how good a chance do you think you have? What is your plan? What goals do you need to reach by what times to really have an opportunity to compete in the primary?
Yes. So according to the internet, I have an approximately 14% chance of winning the nomination. I am 5th right now. I've raised over $2 million, and most people have never heard of me. And 99% of my donors are small donors. The average donation is only $18. And what am I running on? I'm running on a platform of giving every American $1,000 a month. It's like people look up and be like, we can do that, and be like, yeah, Thomas Paine, Martin Luther King, Milton Friedman,
but when you say it,
in
I don't
one
think
state of Alaska.
It doesn't sound realistic. It's too good to be true. Where's the money coming from? Like, what's the number again? What's the math? Give me the math. $1,000 a month. Everybody
$1,000 a month. Headline cost is about $3 trillion a year.
$3 trillion. Where's that come from?
Yeah, but then you look at it. Our current spending on income support programs is about $1.5 trillion.
And so that's welfare, income support. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, and so it substitutes out, not entirely, but it reduces the headline cost from $3 trillion to $1.8 trillion. And then you have this $1.8 trillion. You get $800 billion from the value-added tax that falls most heavily on the Amazons and Googles and Facebooks
the big
of the
companies.
world. So then you're at $1 trillion. You get $400 billion from all the economic growth from putting $1,000 a month into our hands that we spend, and it circulates the economy. You end up generating a lot of new tax
$4 billion
revenue.
will take time because it'll have to start.
Oh yeah, you probably have like
the government will have to front the cost.
Yeah, you front the cost for like a year, but the economic growth happens pretty quickly because the money goes right into the economy. And 78% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. 57% can't afford an unexpected $500 bill. So the money's going to get spent. This money's like going to go right back into bills and car repairs.
Oh, they're going to waste it, Andrew. They're not going to know what to do with it. They're going to buy drugs. They're just going to run around here and be frivolous. Don't you know what you're doing? You're making America lazy again.
Well, the beautiful thing is it's our money. Like, we're the owners and shareholders of this country, and we need to make the economy work for us as fast as possible. Because, again, we're in a race we can't win. If we continue just to see ourselves as inputs into the giant capital efficiency machine, we lose. But really what's bad is this dehumanizing economic system that is handcuffing everybody, where it's turning us all into economic inputs. It's why we have ideas about why we have to turn coal miners into software engineers, which makes absolutely no sense when you think about it. It's that if people don't have economic value, then they have no human value. And so then you're like stretching to be like, oh, well, how do I find economic value for you? When a lot of those solutions don't actually work on the ground.
And so a lot of what you're talking about with, what did you call it? The freedom, what'd you call it?
Freedom dividend.
The freedom dividend. This proposal, how many, other than the few guys that you've talked to, how many responses or feedback have you got from any of the Amazons, the Facebooks, or anything now that you're putting this on a national platform?
Well, I've got over 100 technologists who've endorsed me and are supporting my campaign personally. But a majority of Democrats support universal basic income or the freedom dividend. And this is not my idea. The primary proponent of this was Dr. Martin Luther King in 1967 in his book, Chaos or Community. And that last year, before he was killed, he was going around giving speeches saying, we need to have a guaranteed minimum income in this country. We need to team up with people who are being exploited across all categories. And then, unfortunately, he was assassinated the following year. So this is not Andrew Yang. This is Martin Luther King. This is Thomas Paine. This is Milton Friedman. This is Elon Musk. I mean, like, a lot of people are looking up and saying, you know what? We're in a race we cannot win. We're in a race against the machines that we will lose on an epic scale. There are 3.5 million truck drivers in this country. Some are listening to this right now. My friends in Silicon Valley are working on trucks that can drive themselves, that they say will be on the highways in 5 to 10 years. So what then happens to the 3.5 million Americans who drive trucks for a living, or the 5 million plus Americans who work in truck stops, motels, and diners that rely on the truck stopping every day?
So it just feels like the goal appears automation. everywhere. Like, is that the goal? Like, it's almost like people are racing for this to be some sort of horror movie apocalypse where we are literally taken over by robots. Not to be dramatic, but it really does feel as if that is the path.
But
that
we
are
do
on to
see
some
it because
extent.
they want to save money. Look at it. I remember I walked by a McDonald's and there was like 2 people working behind the desk. It was nothing but a bunch of little like stands that you could just order and get everything done
they
yourself.
got rid of
There's
the
one
tellers.
person that's just kind of just handing you the food.
So, what other places do you kind of want to fight back against technology sort of ruling everything?
Well, there are very, very clear studies that show that we've had a massive surge in anxiety and depression among teenage girls in particular that is completely consistent with when they got smartphones and started using various social media apps. And the engineers at those social media companies say, again, flat out, we have designed your smartphone to become a very powerful slot machine and dopamine delivery system.
It's an addictive machine.
Yeah, because their financial incentives are like, hey, the more I can get you to engage, the more advertising money I can squeeze out of you. And do I care one iota if I end up inducing depression among tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of young Americans? Well, like there's no money in not depressing you, but there is money in getting you to stare at this thing. So one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to have a department of the attention economy that's run by a design ethicist named Tristan Harris, whom I'm friends with, and say, look, we got to clean up the slot machines that are like hypnotizing and depressing our young people.
How do we do that?
Well, first, I become president. Thank you all. Thank you, voters.
Congratulations.
There you go. Andrew Yang, 2020. Go check it out.
And then I say, hey guys, your financial incentives clearly drive you to extreme behaviors. And if you were generous, you'd say it's not your fault. You're just like captive to the almighty dollar. So congratulations, we're going to free you from the almighty dollar. We're going to bring Tristan in and say, hey guys, now you have some other incentives, which is not to depress the heck out of tons of Americans. And that's going to be your new mission aside from maximizing your profits. And if you ask a public company like Snap or Facebook right now to adopt this behavior, they literally cannot, because it would be illegal for them to not illegal, but it would be against good corporate governance to not maximize their shareholder value. Like the only way they
Wall
can
Street, they got to do the numbers. They gotta
yes,
get the
you could
numbers.
legitimately fire a board of directors being like, hey, you guys didn't maximize shareholder value. You cared too much about the kids.
It sounds crazy, but real.
But that's our system. Like our system right now is designed to worship the almighty dollar.
So what would they do though? Like, take me through what we would do, how those things would change potentially, so people are less likely to just be obsessed with their phone all the time.
And the great thing is Tristan's actually a guy who sat there and was like helping design this stuff in the first place. So he would say, okay, right now, like you are saying, like if the person has engaged with your app for this amount of time, the next time they do, they need a dopamine hit. And say, okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to change the guidelines on like the timing of the reward mechanisms you have. Or it could even be that a message pops up and says, hey, you've been staring at this phone or this app for 3 hours. You should find a human being or go outside.
Go get friends. Phone shuts off.
Right.
go get friends. Because we are having massive widespread effects on our youth culture. And it's showing up when you get to college campuses. There are record levels of anxiety, depression, and even suicidal tendencies that people have said they've never seen before.
I want to get. Go ahead, Laura.
Well, speaking of young people, I read that you wanted to lower the voting age to 16. Why?
Yeah, so if you look at it, there are a few really good reasons. Number one is you actually can imprint voting behavior quite early. So the earlier someone votes, the more likely they are to vote forever. Number two, our electorate skews old right now, and so our policies end up skewing somewhat old. And the third thing is that at this point, we need to do all we can to engage young voters as soon as possible. And if you lower it to 16-year-olds can pay taxes. So in a way, if you're saying, look, you can pay taxes, but you can't vote, that's not consistent with the way we've done things in other spaces.
And it's true. And by having the electorate skew so old, you're having people make decisions about our country who aren't going to be here to deal with the repercussions of what they're talking about.
Yeah, young people look up and they're like, like I have to deal with climate change. I have to deal with all this mess you're leaving us. And they feel rightfully sidelined. And so, if we just start the voting process a little bit earlier, we can transform American high schools where seniors and juniors are like, holy cow, like I'm going to vote. And they can have political conversations. We could transform the youth culture.
Speaking of school, make community college affordable for all, and then you said control higher costs. higher education costs. How do you plan to do this?
Oh man, like I'm so amped up about this because I had $100K in school loans myself. I used to call them my mistress. It was like writing a check to like another town every month, being like, I hope they're having a good time over there. So I know that right now we're up to 1.5 trillion in school loans that are like this massive crushing anchor on top of young people in particular, where everyone's like living in their parents' basement trying to pay off these phantom loans. What should they be doing? They should be buying their own homes. They should be starting families. They should be starting businesses. They should be doing things that drive our economy forward. This 1.5 trillion in school debt we have is new. It was less than 100 billion in 1999. It's gone up more than 15 times in 20 years. So you have to look at why is that? Why is college 2.5 times more expensive than it was when I went to college?
And why is that?
Yeah, it didn't get 2.5 times better. It didn't make it like 2.5
And
times
it
more
doesn't
awesome.
equal to inflation either.
No. I mean,
Not even close.
yeah, no. Like if you look, and I have this in my book. I have a graph about education inflation, which is like up here, and then healthcare inflation, which is also up here, and then other inflation, which is like down here.
Right.
And so the reason why education is so expensive, it's not professors, it's not even buildings, because when you build a new building, you actually can get rich people to donate money to put their name on it. What it is it's administrators. The ratio of administrators who don't teach to students has gone up 150% in the same period of time. That costs have skyrocketed. So what you have to do as a society, first, I'm going to forgive a ton of the school loans. I'm just going to say, look, like, what would we rather have our people doing? Servicing loans forever or moving our economy and society forward? Second, I would go to the colleges and say, look, you're all dependent on federal loans for, to exist, more or less. You have to bring your administrator to student ratio down to what it was in the 90s. And we'll give you 5 years to do it, but you got to do it. And they're going to look up and say, we can't do that. It's impossible. And then I'll say, I think you're going to figure it out somehow. And then they would do it, and then they'd realize it doesn't actually impact the student experience.
Well, it feels
how many
like they're
people
on
they
the
have in
take.
back.
If you're just hiring more administrators, it sounds like a badly run business. If you have so many your administrator to student ratio isn't where it needs to be.
Well, I've run a national nonprofit that I started, which is sort of the same picture as a lot of these universities. And the very natural inclination is to say, look, we just need to hire more awesome people. And there's nothing wrong with the people you hire, but then over time you just end up with a lot of people. and that's what's happened to these universities. They become very complex administrative and bureaucratic organizations. And so they feel like they need all these people, but over time it becomes a giant tax on the folks who are getting the education.
It's interesting, too, because in college, if you're really being honest about it, how many administrators do you need? Like in high school, you can almost make a much more reasonable claim for why you need administrators because you're literally still dealing with people who are like kids. So you need a certain amount of people that are around to literally
College,
keep
these are
order.
adults.
College, I feel like if my college experience, and I went to University of Maryland, which is a huge state school and is still better priced than a lot of others, but it's gone up dramatically since I was there. I barely interacted with administrators. You felt like the entire place could have run on professors and students. People who are in college are trying to get their education. They're not children who need a million vice principals to keep everyone
That's why I
in
said
order.
I think they're on the take. People are getting jobs at universities, right? State-run schools or whatever, and it's because they can. Because the school's like,
Right,
yeah,
we can find something for
we
someone.
need to have you on staff. You know how many people I know who are on staff at a university
right.
that might teach 4 classes a year, and they're just like on staff.
4 classes a year means you're doing a lot. That's better than, I think there are people who are just on staff.
Oh, we're talking about non-teachers here.
Yeah. Then they'll hit you though with getting rid of jobs.
Well, that's the reason why the freedom dividend is so vital, is that we have to make big transitions in this country. We're getting rid of a ton of jobs for, again, like the biggest employment categories in the United States are retail, administrative, and customer service, which includes call center workers. AI is going to be able to do the job of a call center worker in the next several years, and there are 2.5 million call center workers still.
I
in the
get
US.
robocalls ad nauseum now. So I mean,
I'm going to outlaw the robocalls. What I'm talking about is when you call the customer service line, and then right now, if you get a bot, you're like, give me a human. I hate this bot.
Right.
But then in about 3 years, the bot is going to be indistinguishable from a human. You're going to call and they'll be like, hey, what's up? What can I do for you? And, and then you'll be
So
like,
scary. Oh my god.
yeah, but then that's going to eliminate hundreds of thousands of jobs. Food service and food prep, you talked about McDonald's just rolling out self-serve everywhere. Truck driving and transportation. Trucking is the most common job in 29 states. And then manufacturing is still number 5. And all of these things are getting automated away very, very quickly. So it's not just that we have to start eliminating the bureaucracy. And this is the danger we're in, is everyone's looking around. Everyone's looking for islands to jump on right now. There's like a collective freak out. And so if you look at the universities and you're like, hey guys, you have to feel some pain too, then they're going to freak out too. But frankly, the rest of us are already freaking out. And so it's not right for there to be this university system that's, again, essentially a tax on our people. What have they done? They just gouged our families. Families have felt they have no choice but to take out outrageous loans that are guaranteed by the federal government to pay for it. And then they're stuck with these loans forever.
And then they don't even pay the athletes. The athletes make them billions of dollars at some of these schools, and what do they get?
They get an education, but I'm with you that it's a fraud. We need to have big time NCAA athletes get paid. We need to have essentially for-profit entities that are aligned with the big universities that are making millions, tens of millions, and you can see it very clearly in the coaches' salaries and the athletic directors'
It's
salaries.
very easy to see.
Yeah, you know who the highest paid person in the state of Connecticut is? All of like the public
Women's
organizations.
basketball coach?
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Yeah, it's the UConn basketball coach.
What's the basic salary for a coach?
Basic.
Well, it depends. If you're a D1 school that makes a lot of money, that you're talking about lots of money, $1 million. Up
Nick
to
Saban makes what? 10,
yeah, up to as
15
much as
million?
$10 million.
Oh my
if you're
God.
A year.
they're the highest paid. The highest paid person. The highest paid person.
He's a state
in
employee, right?
Several
Technically.
states is the coach. Yeah, that's common.
Easy.
University of Alabama is a state school?
Yeah. Yeah, so you have state employees making like $8 million a year or whatnot, and then be like, oh, it's a nonprofit. Like that's tax exempt. You have broadcast rights. The one that I find the most egregious, you have video game likenesses. Like there's like some 18-year-old kid who's being told, shut up and like play. You're getting education.
You're getting an education. You're in a video game. I'm in a video game. I'm right there.
Yeah, it's insane. And also, let's be honest, the education you're even capable of getting. Like, tell me this week that Auburn, Texas Tech, Virginia, and Michigan State, those kids are getting a lot of education this week when they have to prepare for the Final Four on Saturday.
This
Yeah,
week.
seriously.
Yeah,
This month.
this whole month, the whole season.
I had a conversation with this guy who worked at, I think it was EA, one of the big video game companies. They made the college football game, NCAA. And then they said, we want to pay the players. Like, we're going to give them a free copy of the game and like $100, $200 each because it's like the right thing to do. And the NCAA said no. And then they said no to the point where now that game doesn't even exist anymore. Like, just because the company was trying to do right by the players,
Give them a little something.
give them a little something. NCAA was like,
$200.
no, that would make them professionals. Like, blah, blah. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. And the EA executives were like, also like, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah, because it
So
seems
that's a different type.
That's crazy.
That almost is criminal. It's almost criminal when you think about it.
Yeah.
You're stealing.
And so people have asked me, it's like, hey, man, you're running for president. Why do you care about NCAA athletes? And I'm just like, look, what kind of message are we sending to our young people that we can exploit the heck out of them for whose gain? The coach, the athletic director
Well,
of
it's
this
the American
institution.
way exploitation. Come on, it's part of the fabric of who we are.
And
Free labor. Come on.
that
Make
is
America great again. That's right.